Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Bold Predictions for the Florida Gators going into 2025. An episode that I had a blast kind of preparing and kind of coming up with my bold predictions, you might say. Look, this is a team that many of y'all know I am extremely high on heading into 2025. And as a result, I got some hot takes around some of these football players going into 2025. Look, best part about this is that if you're a Florida fan that's watching this episode in the middle of May, and chances are you got some hot takes around this football team as well. Please let it fly in the comment section. This is an opportunity, for all of us to call our shots heading into the 2025 year. Let it fly. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. And I'm going to go with this. 3 wide receivers catch for over 750 yards in the 2025 year. Now, I was kind of playing around with, all right, what's my prediction about this wide receiver room going into the 2025 year? And I was toying around with, Dallas Wilson, 1,000 yards as a true freshman. What I think is probably going to play out is, look, these top 3 wide receivers, Dallas Wilson, J. Michael Sturdivant, and Eugene Wilson, I think are all going to be heavily involved in this offense for a couple of different reasons. One, I think Billy Napier in this Florida offense probably going to lean into more 11 personnel in 2025. Like, we've seen Billy Napier run a lot of 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the football field. I look at the personnel on Florida for offense in 2025 and say, you got to do everything you can to get these wide receivers on the football field, because I think it's one of the more talented position groups on this football team. So I think you see this offense lean into the wide receiver play a little bit more in 2025. And then I look at it and say, I just think all 3 of these pass catchers are going to get involved in different ways. Like, Eugene Wilson's still going to be the yards after the catch guy. He's going to have a ton of space to operate in that underneath, portion of the football field, you might say. Like, when you have J. Michael Sturdivant, Dallas Wilson, really, really good working down the field vertically, both of them, with a guy in DJ Lagway who pushes the ball down the field and throws the deep ball just about as good as anybody in the country. Dallas Wilson and J. Michael Sturdivant are going to be heavily involved in this offense, especially working vertically. And because of that, like, there's going to be so much space created underneath for a guy like Eugene Wilson. I look at all 3 of these guys and say, I think all 3 are going to be heavily involved. I don't know if you see a guy that dominates the target share in this Florida Gators offense. So instead of picking my wide receiver 1, I'm just going to go with, hey, all 3 of these pass catchers are going to be heavily involved. Now, where this bold prediction can go wrong, what if Vernell Brown emerges as a guy you got to get involved, as well as a guy like Aiden Mizell or a guy like Nashawn Montgomery, another very talented true freshman? Where I think this bold prediction falls short is if, hey, there's more than just these 3 wide receivers that we want to get heavily involved. In that case, it might be 5 guys go for over 500 yards. But as of right now, going into the fall, give me Dallas Wilson, J. Michael Sturdivant, and Eugene Wilson, all 3 of them going for 750 plus yards in the 2025 year. Really dynamic trio of wide receivers for Florida in the 2025 season. Number 2, this is bold, I think. DJ Lagway runs for 500 plus yards in the 2025 year. Now, Billy Napier has a line to toe here. We want to keep DJ Lagway healthy, but we also have a quarterback that is very uniquely gifted in terms of the athlete that he is. I think maybe even some Florida fans kind of forget how good of an athlete DJ Lagway is. He had I think, pretty bad hamstring injury that he was playing through as a true freshman in 2024 that really limited his ability to get involved in the run game, to get outside the pocket, and be the athlete that we knew this kid was coming out of high school. Look, he's been in bubble wrap all off season long. He's going to enter the 2025 year as healthy as he's probably ever been in his college football career. I think that you don't want to run him 20 plus times a game, but I think he's too good of an athlete not to utilize what he can be running the football, whether it's keeping it on read options, whether it's a few design quarterback runs, whether it's him just getting outside the pocket and being creative on his own and kind of some of those scramble situations I think he's going to wake a lot of people up because that you didn't see that from him last year because of the injury. He's one of the best athletes on the football field. And if you want to maximize DJ Lagway, I think you have to let him go be an athlete on the football field as well. And I think you play so many really big games that there are going to be big moments, whether it's in the red zone, whether it's fourth and short, that you probably want to use DJ Lagway and what he can bring with his legs. Because of all the big moments that I think Florida will be in, I think they're going to try to get DJ Lagway involved a little bit more than we expect, using his legs. Give me 500 plus yards. And look, I think DJ Lagway can handle. I feel like we forget how big and physical this kid is. Like when DJ Lagway is running the football, you're almost a little bit nervous about the linebackers who are trying to tackle him because he's just as big, if not bigger, than the linebackers trying to tackle him. Too good of an athlete, in my opinion, not to get him involved with his legs. And again, it's a line you have to try to walk carefully. We want to keep DJ Lagway healthy, but we also want to utilize a massive part of his game, and that is what he is as an athlete. Number 3, probably the one that I think is most exciting and maybe like the most important of Florida season in 2025, and that is 3 freshman All-Americans in the 2025 year. I think there was a reason that Florida wasn't as aggressive as maybe some of us expected in the transfer portal. I think the reason was Billy Napier kind of knew what he had with the freshmen that were coming into this program. I look at Dallas Wilson and say I'm not going to go as far to say he's a lock to be a freshman All-American, but if you're looking at the freshman wide receivers that are going to have the biggest impact on this on a football team in the country, Dallas Wilson, DeCorey, and Moore are probably on that short list. So I feel really good about Dallas Wilson. Would not be surprised if Vernell Brown or Nashawn Montgomery sneak into that conversation. I think they're good enough. Now it's just, do they get on the football field enough? Then you go to the defensive side of the football and say, I think there's going to be a couple guys that have a chance. I think Florida loves Ty Jackson. I just don't know if he's going to play enough with how loaded that linebacker room is. Stephon Shivers probably going to have to play a decent amount of football for Florida as a true freshman. You look at the secondary, whether it's Ben Hanks, whether it's Lagonza Hayward, whether it's Drake Stubbs, all 3 of those guys probably going to be in the 2 deep for Florida in 2025 and very well likely might have to start some games for Florida in the 2025 year. One of the things we learned from this team coming out of spring practice, they like a lot of these freshmen that enrolled early and that were with this football team in the spring. I think Florida's going to have to rely on some true freshmen. I think they're comfortable doing so. And I think as a result, you probably get a couple of guys that are freshman All-Americans for Florida immediately in 2025. Number 4, Caleb Banks, first team All-American in 2025. And this might be the biggest storyline for Florida on defense. I think Caleb Banks would be my, preseason first team All-American selection. And I think Caleb Banks, one, is going to have to play a lot of football because there's maybe some concerns about the depth in the middle of this defensive line. But more importantly, I just think he's one of the best interior defensive linemen in the country going into 2025. Like outside of Peter Woods. And I think even Caleb Banks, Peter Woods is kind of a discussion that there's really not many defensive linemen that I'm taking over Caleb Banks in 2025. The way he played in the month of November, I think had a massive part to do in terms of that turnaround that we saw from that Florida Gators defense. Sat out spring, nursing an injury, kind of getting back 100% healthy. A healthy Caleb Banks in 2025 that plays 12-plus football games. One of, if not the best, interior defensive lineman that you see in the country. Last bold prediction, and I don't know how bold this is because it's a little conservative, but we haven't talked a ton. I feel like at this point we've talked about this roster from just about every angle possible. We haven't talked a ton about the schedule. Florida enters the month of November 5-2. And on the surface, maybe that's not even that bold. Like if Florida fans are sitting there going into November 5-2, I think you feel solid, maybe not great. The first 4 games, I think you got to go 3-1. So you got to go on the road to LSU or on the road to Miami and steal one. Go 3-1 month of October. You get Texas coming to Ben Hill Griffin Stadium with a young quarterback in Arch Manning. That's a game that I don't know if I'm prepared to sit up here and say Florida's going to win that football game, but with the environment that I expect and how good – here's the thing with Florida. There's not a game that you are chalking up as an automatic loss on this schedule. Florida has one of the most talented teams in the country. And so they have a chance to win every single game they play, which is not something we've said about Florida over the last couple of years. So even if you lose that game against Texas, then you got to go on the road to Texas A&M, get a win. You got to play Mississippi State at home, which should be a win. Then you go into the month of November 5-2. Here's my bold prediction, and maybe this is my bold prediction. Florida gets into the playoffs with a 9-3 record. I think that is a very, very likely. And I'm not even saying, like, you look at the back half the month of November with the schedule, I'm not ruling out Florida beating Georgia. In fact, if you said, hey, Florida and Georgia are going to play tomorrow afternoon, I might pick Florida in that football game. On the road at Kentucky, I don't care where you play Kentucky. If Florida's as good as I think they are, they're going to win that football game. On the road at Ole Miss, I have serious question marks about Ole Miss, especially late in the season with the question marks you have about depth. Tennessee at home should be a win. Florida State at home should be a win. If you go 9-3, that means you have some massive wins on this schedule. I don't see many teams that get over Florida, get into the playoffs over Florida with the 9-3 record. And here's the other thing. If one of those losses is to Miami, I don't know, Florida's got a shot at playing for an SEC championship game as well. Those are my bold predictions for Florida in 2025. We'll probably run it back again at some point because I got some other takes that I want to get off my chest. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.